Hello, Conrad and Lucy and Caleb. How are y'all doing today? What do you think of Papa's new cap? You can see I've got the symbols of NOBTS and Level College. These are the schools where Papa teaches. Who knows, maybe y'all will come to school here one day. But in the meantime, we've got more fun things to do, like read X-Men stories, right? So let's get on with the next one. Here we have a dramatic cover, all in red and black with white print. And you see the title says, "And none shall survive." And the editor says, "You must not reveal the incredible ending to any living soul." All right. So evidently the ending is going to be quite a surprise. But we see all of the X-Men, including Professor X, on the floor. They look like they have been overwhelmed by the shadowed menace in the door. So, without further ado, let's look at our story. All right, it begins with triage. The healthcare workers are examining the X-Men after their ordeal with the Sentinels. You remember that they finally defeated all of them with the sacrifice of Dr. Bolivar Trask, but now they're being helped by the military and the medical teams. So let's look and see what is going on. All right, the X-Men are the most unusual fighting team of all time. You know, the title is repeated here, "And none shall survive." I'm hoping that's an exaggeration. All right, so Angel is thinking, the fat's in the fire now. There's no way for Professor X to keep our battle out of the headlines after all this. And look, here's a medical technician trying to take Iceman's pulse. It's not working. All right. The editor says, though the youthful X-Men managed to defeat the deadly Sentinels last issue, they did not escape unscathed. Within moments, a first aid team of National Guard medics reaches the scene. All right, so the National Guardsman says, "My troops will take command, Inspector. It's a military matter now." And so the policeman says, "Okay with me, General." Let's look on down the page. So Marvel Girl is wrapped up in a blanket and drinking maybe some coffee or water. She says, "I wonder how much longer the professor can keep his connection with us a secret." And look at Beast. He's being a drama queen. He's saying, "Have a care, Kildare. Each and every toe is virtually priceless." Oh, yeah, right. And so the policeman said, "We'd better see about getting you home safely, Professor Xavier." "Don't worry about me, officer," says the professor. "My car is parked not far from here." And the National Guardsman says, "Comb the area. Report anything that moves. Let's go." And then the professor continues, "Perhaps one of the X-Men will be good enough to drive me back to my school." All right, well, let's keep going. On behalf of the armed services, Professor, says the National Guard leader, "I want to thank you for your aid. It was most courageous of you to offer to come here and advise us." The professor answers, "I was glad to be able to help, General." And then his thoughts say, "He thinks of me as a civilian advisor. After all, there's no reason for anyone to suspect that I'm the leader of the X-Men." "There'll be some mighty red faces from now on, Professor," says the general. "All those who call the X-Men menaces to society will have a lot of apologizing to do. In fact, I myself used to fear their power until I saw how they risked their lives to help all of us. Don't you agree, Professor?" And of course the professor says, "Indeed I do, General." And then he thinks, that's why I decided to release my mental hold over your mind, so the X-Men would get due credit. So the general orders, Captain, order your men to search the ruins of the Sentinel's fortress. Be quick about it. We move out before sundown. And then the professor remembers what supreme irony. The Sentinels had been created to destroy the X-Men, and yet it was necessary for us to smash them in order to save humanity, the humanity which hated us. Are you injured, Professor? Asks the medic. We're taking some of the X-Men to the hospital for treatment. If you require any care, we can. And he answers, no, I'm perfectly fine, thank you. I was in the police helicopter, safely removed from any of the actual fighting. And he thinks, I suspected that Iceman, the Beast, and Cyclops were injured. And then he speaks, perhaps one of the other X-Men will drive me to my school. I would enjoy getting to know them better. And Marvel Girl says, the Angel and I will be glad to do it, Professor. And then he sends a mental command. Attention, Beast. Exercise extreme caution. Do not remove your mask. Iceman, remain in icy form. Your true identities must not be exposed. And then the medic, looking at the Beast's feet, says, man, if he ever got an ingrown toenail, it would be Innsville. The professor sends a mental message to Cyclops. You will be responsible until I reach the hospital. Seconds later, Cyclops, the Beast, and Iceman are speedily transported to the nearest hospital as the Angel and Marvel Girl accompany Professor Xavier to his waiting sedan. And then here are the thoughts of Cyclops. The professor had to let us go to the hospital, no matter how risky it is. If he protested, it would have aroused too many suspicions. I'm not badly hurt, except for some bruises, but I hope Hank and Bobby are okay. And so the X-Men leave the scene of one of their most fantastic battles, the site where the Sentinels were born, and where they, along with their tragic creator, perished as the result of a mad dream gone wrong. And so we're going to turn away from the Sentinel's fortress and move on to the next exciting X-Men adventure. A short time later, in a hushed hospital room, the professor is watching over Iceman. He's thinking, Iceman's injury was more serious than I thought. He blacked out in the ambulance and they can't bring him back to consciousness. The doctor says, it was good of you to stop by to see the X-Men, Professor, but I'm afraid Iceman's condition must be listed as critical. Due to the mutant nature of his body, it is impossible to make an accurate diagnosis of his injuries. Well, I would think so. Think about it. How could they check his heartbeat or his pulse or do any x-rays when his body is covered with ice? So alien is he to normal medical knowledge that we can do nothing but keep him under observation and hope for the best. Professor says, I understand, doctor, none of the usual medications can be given to one whose physical makeup defies anything science has ever encountered before. And Professor thinks, even I, with my mutant brain, cannot help Bobby now. He is in the hands of a power greater than any human. Okay, talking about God, of course. But the professor thinks he's starting to move, trying to speak. And so even unconscious, he speaks these words. Look out, I'll tackle the Sentinel. I'll stop him somehow. I know I'm the youngest, but I'll show them. I'll prove that I'm every inch an X-Man. I won't fail them. I won't. I'll make them proud of me. They need me. I won't let them down. So even as he is unconscious, his fitful dreams take him back to the battle with the Sentinels and his desire to be helpful and productive in their fight. The doctor says he's delirious. No way of knowing whether it's a good symptom or a dangerous one. You'd better leave now, Professor. And the professor thinks, all these months, these many missions, I've protected my X-Men. I pray that Bobby Drake won't mark the first time I'm faced with failure. With heavy heart, Charles Xavier next visits Hank McCoy. Hank says, hello, Professor. Is there any change in Iceman's condition yet? And then the professor sends a thought bolt. Remember, Hank, do not under any circumstance remove your mask. And another word of caution, act as though I am merely a casual friend. No one must suspect I am actually your leader. And so he speaks and says, no, McCoy, he is still on the critical list. The poor lad is delirious. The doctor says, the beast's fractures are healing remarkably well. It's a pity he won't permit us to remove his mask. As a scientist, there is so much more I want to learn about his physiological makeup. And then the professor says, perhaps the X-Men have good reason for wishing to keep their true identities secret, Doctor. And then he thinks, until mankind loses its unfounded suspicion, its dangerous distrust of mutants. And the doctor says, unfortunately, we have no legal right to insist that he unmask. If only we knew who the X-Men's parents are, we might learn so much about human mutation. And the professor thinks, their parents, the one weak link in our chain of security. If any deadly enemy of ours ever captured one of my X-Men's parents, what a hold he would have over us. How tragic that science must be denied our full cooperation because of the evil that still lurks in the world. I sense some foreshadowing in the professor's musings. Let's see if any of his concerns actually come to reality. At that very moment nearby, look, the angel is flying and carrying a telephone. The nurse says, what on earth is going on up there? And the angel says, would you mind letting a fellow have a little quiet, please? And the other nurse says, the angel is calling the automatic phone answering device at X-Men headquarters to learn if there were any messages while they were away. He lifted the phone into the air so we couldn't see what number he dialed. You'll have to get down, young man. That's against hospital regulations. And so the angel is talking on the phone. Hello? What? Holy smoke! That's the last thing I expected. And he thinks, I've got to notify the professor fast. I wonder what's going on. And the professor is close by and he sends a mental inquiry to the angel. I'm already here, Warren. I detected your mental agitation. What's wrong? Merely think it to me. And so Warren thinks, it's my parents. They called the school. They left word. They're coming to visit. They're worried because they haven't heard from me. And then the professor thinks, the phone, quickly. Perhaps I can stop them before they leave. And then he says, may I have the phone, young man? Sure, Professor, answers Angel. There you are. And then Angel thinks, if they reach the school and find it deserted, what will they think? How can we explain? The professor responds mentally. They mustn't reach it first. I've had a feeling of danger from there all day. And then, after quickly dialing the angel's home number, the professor says, Mrs. Worthington, this is Professor Xavier. I've had my students with me on a field trip to gather material for a research paper. That is why your call was answered by an automated device. Well, that's a relief, Professor, says Angel's mother. My husband and I were quite worried. At any rate, we're planning a short motor trip and thought we'd stop off and see Warren while in your neighborhood. But it's exam time now, says the professor. Oh, we'll only stay a few minutes, Professor. See you later. Bye now. And so, of course, a mother wants to see her son, and so she's insistent that they stop by for a visit. And so the professor communicates mentally with the angel. I could dissuade her, but I can't help feeling uneasy about their visit. And then Angel thinks, why, sir? Is anything wrong? He says, yes, with Iceman critically ill and the beast recovering from a fracture, plus this sense of menace I cannot shake, I think you'd better fly to the school now, Angel, and do a little scouting around. I'm on my way, sir, responds the angel. If only Mom and Dad hadn't decided to visit the school now. The prof is never wrong when he senses danger, and I can't let them get involved in it. I sure hate to leave while Bobby is ill, but I guess the professor will stay with him. And then, as he flies through the air, he says, gosh, it feels great to be in flight again. Then for the next few minutes, as he wings his way toward Westchester, the high-flying angel soars and glides like a falcon in flight. No other human, no one who has never possessed wings, can imagine how wonderful it is to actually fly. What about it? Conrad, Lucy, Caleb, can you imagine what it would be like to have wings and to fly, to soar high in the air? Well, of course, we have airplanes that can get us up there, but my goodness, Papa often thinks about how fun it would be to fly. Oh, look at this picture. Here's an artist's rendering of Angel flying through the air with the greatest of ease, all right? And so the high-spirited youth streaks over the city, little dreaming of the strange and startling menace which awaits him when he reaches his destination. He says, somehow when I'm high in the sky this way, I feel there is no danger I cannot face, no problem I cannot solve, no enemy I cannot defeat. How quickly he forgets the sentinels and the juggernaut, right? Everything seems clean and pure and right, the way it ought to be, the way it must be one day if man is ever to fulfill his promise, his glorious destiny. And so up in the air, it feels good to Warren to be flying around as the angel. Well, let's see what happens next. But even as the astounding angel plummets earthward toward his goal, the front door of Professor Xavier's school slowly begins to open, and from inside, a menace says, one of them approaches now. Who can this menacing opponent be? I had hoped to attack them all at once to demonstrate my overwhelming power. We don't know what that overwhelming power is, do we? Ooh, there are his eyes. Perhaps it will be even more satisfying to defeat them one at a time. I will then be able to savor each individual victory, to watch each accursed X-Man fall helplessly before me. The first one comes, I shall close the door again and wait. I wonder what the professor meant about sensing danger. The school has never looked quieter or more peaceful, but looks are deceiving from the outside. There's nothing outside out of the ordinary outside the building, not a sign of life anywhere, so I'd better poke around inside. It's not like the prof to send anyone on a wild goose chase, says someone with wings like a goose. So he opens the door and realizes, that's strange. The door always locks automatically behind us when we leave, but it's open now. And he enters into the hallway, and look, what do you think of that? It's a suit of armor, all right, with a powerful axe or halberd in its hand. And then, like a senseless sequence from a mad, fantastic nightmare, a heavy, lethal battle axe suddenly disengages itself from the steel hand which held it and hurtles through the corridor right toward the angel. Look, that battle axe in the knight's hand, it acts like it has a life of its own, and with its amazing power, it rises and flings itself through the air. Clang! It hits the wall, but long, hard months of ceaseless training prove their worth as the angel's amazing aerial agility succeeds in saving his life. And so he flips in the air and dodges the battle axe. He hears a voice. "Welcome home, you winged blunderer. You shall never leave here again under your own power." And so the angel flies through the air, flying toward the voice. He thinks there is someone, but who? Who would dare? "Just stay where you are, mister. I'll make you eat those words." His voice came from down the corridor, but there's no place to hide. From here to the end of the hall, he won't escape me. No matter how fast he is or how strong he is, I'll get him. I've got to be swift and sure. And so look how swiftly the angel flies toward the end of the hall, seeking the menace whose words he hears. Oh no! But then zooming down the hallway like a human missile, the winged mutant realizes he's speeding into a trap, but too late to stop himself. There's something in front of me. It suddenly dropped into place. I'm going to hit it. Oh! And so, poor angel, he runs headlong into this invisible wall, and he knocks himself out. And so he lays there helpless on the floor. Overshadowing him is this shadow of a menace. He says how easy it was to clip the angel's wings, but he is only the first. Only the first. So who's next? Let's keep reading and find out. Okay, we're back at the hospital. Professor Charles Xavier picks that exact moment to check upon the condition of X-Men's deputy leader. And the Cyclops is saying, "No, Doc, I can't, I'm sorry, I can't let you examine my eyes." But the doctor says, "I must insist, son. It's hospital routine. Now don't be difficult." So as the professor enters, he thinks, Scott needs help. I was afraid of this. "Pardon the intrusion, doctor," says the professor. My name is Xavier. I have had the opportunity of seeing the X-Men in action and so the doctor says, "I've heard of you, Professor. Perhaps you can convince this young man to let me check his eyes. Optometry is my specialty. I believe I might be able to help him." And then Cyclops crosses his arms and says, "Nobody can examine my eyes, no matter what happens." The professor sends Scott a thought bolt. "He won't take your word for it, Scott. You'll have to convince him as dramatically as possible. Now." And so Cyclops opens up his visor, zap, and he says, "This is a mild example of what happens if my protective visor is removed from my eyes, even to the slightest degree." "Good heavens," says the doctor, as Cyclops' eye beam knocks his instrument out of his hand. And the doctor says, "You mean you cannot control the destructive force of your eyes? You have to keep them shielded all the time?" "I'm afraid that's it, Doc," answers Cyclops. "It would be worth your life to try to remove my visor." The professor says, "If you're through with your patient, doctor, I wonder if I might speak with him in private. I was asked to bring him a message from one of the other X-Men." "Certainly, Professor," answers the doctor. "They aren't prisoners here." Hence, a few minutes later, we see Cyclops strolling Professor outside on the sidewalk. And Professor sends him a message. "Say nothing yet, Scott. We must be extremely careful to act like casual acquaintances so none suspect my real connection with you." And so he asks out loud, Would you mind wheeling me to that shady arbor, my boy?" "We're alone now, sir," says Cyclops. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "I'm afraid so," answers the professor. "I've lost mental contact with the angel after sending him back to the school. I suspect some danger awaiting us there. Iceman is still too ill to be moved, and I prefer the Beast and Marvel Girl to remain here in case they're needed. But you and I had best return to the school at once. I have a feeling that Warren needs us." Well, that feeling is right, isn't it? And so Scott says, "I'll get your car, sir. It's parked just around the corner." Then, after an hour of breakneck driving, they finally arrive at the school. "There's the school at last," says Cyclops. "Have you managed to contact the angel mentally, Professor?" "No," answers the professor, "and that's what worries me. I seem to sense some sort of mental barrier around the school, something my own mutant brain cannot penetrate. It must be the work of this menacing intruder." "The barrier is stronger than ever here inside. Take every precaution, Cyclops. There is some great power being used against us." And so Cyclops hollers out, "Angel, this is Cyc. Do you read me? Where are you, fella?" And inside we see this menacing, shadowy figure. He thinks, two additional victims for me. I must make sure they do not get bored. "Ree! Professor," says Cyclops, "listen, what's that?" Professor answers, "It's my Cerebro machine. The danger is even greater than I feared." "Ree! The machine seems to be going mad. The menace must be incredibly close," says the professor. Cyclops answers, "I'll shut it off before it deafens us." Cerebro only reacts that way when a dangerous mutant threatens. That means some powerful Homo superior has invaded this building and is waiting to attack even now. And Cyclops realizes he must have already overcome Angel, and we don't even know who he is. "Only the most powerful of mutants could prevent me from mentally reaching out to him," says the professor. "We must learn who he is while we still can." Cyclops hollers, "Professor, behind you, look out." And look, here is some a mechanical menace that is rising up behind the professor. It clamps down on his head, and the professor realizes it's a mechanical mental wave distorter, the one type of weapon I cannot fight. It's blacking out my brain. I can't think. Oh! And the professor falls unconscious. And here comes Cyclops saying, "I'll rip it off you no matter what." Thwack! Oh! And so the Cyclops runs into another invisible barrier, just like the one that stopped the angel. And he realizes it's a transparent shield. It dropped down between us. Fortunately, Cyclops wasn't moving as fast as Angel, so he's not knocked out. Someone's playing a cat and mouse game with us. In any game like that, it's Cyclops who turns into the cat, into a power blasting tiger, and so he shoots out his eye beams. But no sooner does Cyclops' blistering force beam strike the strange invisible shield than it causes an explosive backlash, which sends the startled mutant reeling. Thoom! Oh no, his eye beam acted against him. Then, regaining his footing once more, the courageous youth again approaches the strange barrier, but with far greater precaution. And he thinks, it's been previously prepared to hurl back the force of my own ocular blast. Whoever is responsible for it knows about my power. Otherwise, he could never have created such an ingenious device. Then, without warning, the lights, they've gone out. Click. The entire building has been plunged into total darkness. But here's the voice. And now, X-Man, you shall learn how totally powerless you are against me. What's happening next? Thok, a fist, hits Cyclops from the side. Cyclops thinks that voice sounded familiar, almost as if, ugh. And again, he tries his I-beam. Whoever you are, you forgot that my force beam is just as effective in the dark as in the light. Zap! And so he sends out his I-beam. Overconfident fool, I forget nothing. And so again, out of the darkness, a fist strikes him, this time from behind. Oof! Before finishing you, says this darkened menace, I want you to see how useless your much vaunted beam is against genuine power. Whoever he is, thinks Cyclops, he seems to anticipate my every move, but I'm not beaten yet. My force beam still has plenty of energy left. And so again, he shoots out his energy beam. Wherever you are, he says, I'll get you. I'll blast this room in every direction. And so he shoots out his I-beam and spins around, shooting off this powerful I-beam in every direction. But even after describing a perfect circle with his awesome power beam, Cyclops tensely stops, holding his breath, and waits, listening for the sound of a falling body, but a sound which never comes. And he thinks nothing. If he's still in here, he has some sort of power which is impervious to my own force blasts. He must have planned this whole thing carefully. The advantage is his now, unless I can reach the light switch before he stops me. And so he runs in the darkness toward the light switch. But the menace says, a nice try, X-Man, but a futile one. I expected you to race for the switch. Whap! And so he strikes at his legs with a stick and trips him. And so Cyclops falls on his head. And now it is time to end the charade by using only my hammering fists, so that you still cannot be certain what my true power is. Crack! And he knocks Cyclops unconscious there in the dark, using only his fists. What is the true power of this menace whom we cannot see and is as of yet unknown? Well, we'll have to find out when we return to this story. But at this point, Angel and Cyclops and even Professor X are now unconscious. The Beast and Marvel Girl are back at the hospital with an unconscious Iceman. And remember, Mr. and Mrs. Worthington, the Angel's parents, are on their way. What if this menace encounters them? Well, all of this is a great mystery, and we'll advance further in finding more out when we return to the story later on. Okay, I hope y'all are enjoying the story. We'll talk more about it later. Bye-bye.